All right, welcome to another WARR Media Soccer Special. I am Saul Rodriguez, joined by a pair of WARR Media contributors, Jason Kessler and Muzz Quadri. Thanks for joining me, fellas. How are we doing today, Jason?
I'm doing all right. Doing all right.
How you doing, Muzz?
Doing great. Good to be back on another episode.
Yes, sir, of course. And talking the world's game as we love to do. And I think, we're going to talk a little bit about the Gold Cup, as well as Lionel Messi and all that stuff going on as well. Of course, we got to start, with what one of the most recent events that happened. Of course, the Women's World Cup is coming up. They're playing in Auckland and Australia. There was a situation today, as we're recording this on Wednesday, July 19th. There was a shooting that occurred in Auckland, and I have heard the most recent that there is many injured and 2 confirmed deaths. So, of course, they haven't said who or what. Regardless of that, we hope and we got everyone sending positive vibes over to Auckland. Hopefully, everything is okay. And as of course the games kick off on Thursday evening in the U.S. Hopefully everything turns out all right over there. But the main thing that we wanted to get into today, of course, we had the 2023 Gold Cup that just wrapped up, and of course Lionel Messi that arrives now to Miami. So guys, just wanted to talk to you guys in particular, ask you guys a little bit about for the Gold Cup. What were you guys like overall thoughts on the tournament from the U.S. perspective, or just from all there's plenty of surprise teams in there that did have a big effect, like Qatar, Guatemala. But we'll start with you, Muzz. What was something that you took away from the Gold Cup overall?
Yeah, the Gold Cup, and it's a shame that the U.S. wasn't able to make the final, but I think it was expected because they brought what people called not their A team, right? Their B/C team players who didn't play in the Nations League. So the roster was completely changed, and that was on, I think, like the coaching, because they wanted to let those players, get to their European clubs or whatever and all that. But I actually went to the first match here at Soldier Field, which was U.S. versus Jamaica, ended in a draw. The Gold Cup was exciting. Panama was a super strong team, and it said, I think it just said a lot about them. Like I forget which player it was, but he won one of like the major awards, like the Golden Ball for like best player, even though he was on like the losing team for Panama. Mexico, they grinded it out. They did what they needed to do. They pushed past Jamaica. Everyone thought Jamaica was this, strong team, which they were until they weren't. Like, in the finals against Mexico. So it would have been, if it was like complete not minnows, but like Panama versus Jamaica, but it ended up being that way. It was Panama versus Mexico, and it was a good match overall. Like I said, disappointing that the U.S. couldn't get further. Kind of expected in a way, but just disappointing that they couldn't get further. But yeah, good, hats off to Mexico for doing what they needed to do.
Yeah, and you're the guy you mentioned, or the guy you alluded to, is Adalberto Carrasquilla, excuse me. Yeah, he that dude is a pest, and he's a midfielder for Houston Dynamo. That guy just was everywhere on the pitch. I know I was watching the game with my dad, and my dad's like, "What position does this guy play? Because he's everywhere." I'm like, "Yeah, he's a pest." So, but no, you're right. It was definitely. I know, and we'll get to talking about the U.S. But Jason, what was your overall thoughts on the Gold Cup and as well as the result?
Well, for one thing, I'm excited, similar to with the World Cup, where Ecuador had a good performance, and then I was seeing Ecuadorian players in the Premier League and elsewhere in Europe impress. Hopefully, similar push-on effect. Good form here, and the Gold Cup leads to some Panamanians, like you said. What was the name of the guy who played for Houston?
Oh yeah, I know it's a mouthful even for me that I speak Spanish, man.
It was partially I didn't want to mess it up, and partially I was like, I only half paid attention when he said
well,
it, right.
Hey, I'll give you this. His nickname is Coco, so you can call him Coco.
Oh, that was
there you
easy.
go. Yeah.
Push on, do well for the Dynamo, maybe sign on somewhere else in the future, and then just kind of follow that narrative. For personal, selfish reasons, didn't have the greatest of tournaments. I was just looking through where he scored. I knew early in the run, Leon Bailey, who plays for Villa, my side, scored for Jamaica. They didn't win, as we've already discussed, but at least got one in the back of the net. And then continuing on this narrative of people being disappointed in the United States, but if I didn't say this overtly, it was part of my process of watching the World Cup of US isn't careful. Canada's golden generation is going to just leapfrog them. And it came close to happening. I mean, they only lost through penalties. But those two stars and then the team that plays around them is just more cohesive than anything the United States has to do. And they're still young enough that those two big guys, like, again, there are always arguments online about, like, would you want Christian Pulisic to join your side when it's like a Premier League side or whatever? And a lot of, especially Brits, are like, no. But like anybody says Davies or Jonathan David, and like that, the conversation is a lot different. Like, even for a little bit, briefly, there was a rumor of David signing on in the Premier League, and like everybody was super excited. So just from that perspective, I think like US fans might need to change their lens of focus a little bit, because like, again, everybody who's a US national team supporter sees it through this, like, oh, we're better, this is our best generation of players. But there's a whole world of other teams around, and even on CONCACAF, like, there are other moving forces and player developments and momentum in terms of like what philosophies are being played. And if the US isn't careful, I think they might get left behind. Like, they're already not at Mexico's level. Panama had the showing that they have, and like I said, I've been on this train of like, Canada plays good football, have two major stars and a good team around them, and they're both really young still. Like, that's one of those things that could be like Belgium for like the next generation. Like, every time there's a tournament, keep your eye on them. They might not win, but they're going to be in the mix.
Yeah, no, you're right. That definitely is a good comparison, because every year after year, tournament after tournament, Euro, World Cup, everyone's always like Belgium, and now like this last World Cup, I mean, De Bruyne even before the knockout round was saying they weren't going to make it or whatever, that like it was kind of it looked okay with it. So yeah, you're right, and they don't want to get in that mindset. But I think one thing that I find interesting, and despite, even though as Muzz was saying that it wasn't their A team for the US, do you guys think it's not? Because look, the way a lot of Mexican fans look at it is that even if they bring those guys just from Liga Mexicana or whatever, like, they still don't think it's a good enough excuse when they lose to be like, oh, it's our B team. And to be fair, when I was looking at, because I made it a goal of mine to just keep looking at these comment sections and seeing what Americans were saying, like diehard US fans, of seeing what they were saying of like, oh, it wasn't our this team. But I didn't see a lot of that. I didn't see a lot of, well, Pulisic wasn't playing, or Reina wasn't playing, whatever it was. But how do you see it? Like, Jason, do you think that it's a good enough excuse to say they don't bring their good enough players? I think the way you talked about them, I don't think you would say that. But what do you think about that? Some people say, hey, at least it's not a good enough excuse that they didn't.
I mean, I think it's a struggle with any, like, this happens with the African Cup as well. It happens in the fall and everything, where there's going to be a nation in a tournament that gets hamstrung just based on what their club aspirations are, and there might be an equal level star at a rival in that tournament that actually gets to go because they're in different circumstances. So I think, again, from a national perspective, I don't see the United States being a mature soccer playing nation until that excuse isn't valid. And I think it's kind of in that in between phase where it still is kind of valid, because there isn't, like, there should be, like, again, it happens with the European sides too, whether it's through injury or other reasons. You get decimated, things happen with selection choices, and it's a revolving door. But they're still expected to win tournaments if you're the France of the world, the Germanys of the world, things like that. So I think that hopefully the window of opportunity for that to be a valid excuse is closing. Otherwise, I think, again, it's another one of these things where the developmental timeline for a nation that has as many able-bodied people to play this sport and be like competitive internationally just stretches on, the longer that is considered a valid excuse.
What do you think, Mus?
Yeah, no, I think the US fans should echo the Mexican fans that, like, right, they shouldn't like to lose, but it is what it is. They just didn't bring their best, in my opinion, and I think they see the Gold Cup as a lesser tournament now for whatever reason. Since the introduction of the Nation Leagues, I think the Nation Leagues started pretty recently, actually, maybe not more than
it's a couple of years,
2-3 years ago. Cup has been going on for like at least 20 years. Just since the introduction of the Nations League, like, the Gold Cup is like in at least the US mindset, a lesser tournament. So I don't know. I feel like you should echo the Mexican fans, though. They shouldn't like to lose or want to just brush it off. But that's yeah, I guess it depends on the tournament or the mindset they have.
Yeah, and I think as you mentioned the Nations League, I've actually heard some people say that eventually the Nations League will be bigger than the Gold Cup. I don't know what you guys think about that. Like just off the top, like Jason, do you think that you see that's coming true anytime soon, or is that something that maybe it's just hopeful thinking for the leagues? 'Cause obviously, I'm sure FIFA would love that, right? For the leagues to become bigger and bigger.
I mean, isn't it? It doesn't it tie into like what the value incentive or what the rankings are for like playing in the World Cup? It really all comes down to how that's structured. Whatever
Yeah.
is the thing that gets you the most benefit for those major world, not regional competitions, that's automatically going to be it, regardless of the history or not. It's because that's what drives the sport, those 2 and 4 year cycles. So
Yeah. What about you, Muzz? Do you think that you see that happening, or what type of thing would have to happen for that, like the Gold Cup to go lower or something like that?
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's possible. Like you said,
Mhm.
FIFA would love for that to happen. So it's not out of the realm. It's definitely not out of the realm. Is all I have to say.
Mhm.
Like you get all these other competitions, and right there's the Leagues Cup going on right now with like Liga MX and MLS. So, and then the next year's Copa America has CONCACAF plus, you know, CONMEBOL, South America plus, North
Mhm.
America. So, yeah, I don't think it's out of the realm.
Yeah, and I think kind of transitioning to we talked a little bit about the final.
Yeah,
Obviously, with Mexico taking out Panama, I mean, it wasn't easy. I mean, they easily could have lost that game. But a lot of the talk has been, does this mean Mexico's back? Does this mean that they're going to go out there and again continue to dominate CONCACAF? I personally, as a Mexico supporter, do not think this means Mexico's back because it's just one tournament. You got to go out there and continue to, because there's so many. I mean, there's problems top to bottom, and that could be like a whole hour talk here. But Muzz, in your opinion, you think this signals any type of resurgence for Mexico?
yeah, at a base level,
Yeah.
like you and I actually know a decent amount of Mexican fans as well, and they didn't want Mexico to win because they just
Yeah, they did.
they thought it would further entrench the system of the
Mhm.
coach and players and the kind of like the management of how it's done. They just want to
Mhm.
start, I guess, start over for various reasons. Like I don't know the whole
Mhm.
history. Seems like you guys know it, but
Mhm.
um, yeah, I see it as definitely helping their cause, the coach's cause. That young player Santi Jimenez, he's
Mhm.
great. I mean, there's definitely talent out there, and are they, still kings of Concacaf? I guess in a way, right? Um, people like claim like, oh, the Nation League is better, and Mexico didn't win that, and this is Mexico's first whatever Gold Cup, and I don't know a couple of competitions as
Mhm.
well. So yeah, I would say like it's a toss up again. Like they're there, they're pushing. I think yeah, you can never count out Mexico in a way. Like they might be like not down and out, but like lower than U.S. and Canada sometimes here and there. But you can never count out Mexico, right? They always have it in them.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you're right on the fact that there was plenty of people that didn't want Mexico to win. But for me, the way I see it is like two things. One, I don't think the Mexican Federation is ever going to change their way. I just don't see it. Like it's only getting worse. And like even with their new owners, with like it's a whole thing. So and also it's kind of hard for me to root against my own team. It's always been tough. But I understand where they're coming from. Like I understand the mindset there. But yeah, it was really close actually not coming true, or them, Panama could have won that game. But
Yeah.
Jason, what are your thoughts overall on that situation?
There's kind of two sides of the same coin thing. I
Mm,
mean, yeah, like you said, it didn't resolve the problems that exist in Mexican football,
yeah.
and I really have to go through like the youth level to really
Mm,
know whether or not this is turning the corner to go beyond just who's in the squad for this tournament, but to see beyond that. But then on the reverse side of that coin, like it's not like the United States during this period where Mexico's either been dysfunctional or aging out or whatever other reasons why they weren't as dominant as previously. It's not like the United States, maybe, the U.S. men's national team grabbed the bull by the horns and really asserted their dominance and made anybody look foolish. Like they might have won a tournament here, a tournament there, but they didn't do that. And again, I've sung the praises of like how enjoyable it is to watch Canadian football and like how much in terms of club football, their two pillars, their two key stars are more relevant than our American stars, even though there are more of those in the U.S. men's national team. But like Canada didn't like hasn't asserted dominance yet either. So based on that, just by default, by history, by legacy, and just by like still being in the mix competitively, yeah, they are the kings. And maybe Canada and the United States are the crown princes of this, but there's always another tournament. So I think it looks good for Mexico, but it also looks good for the United States and Canada, which speaks well for the spectators that they're going to be watching and supporting. Because you don't want just dominance. Like dominance is great. Dominance is only interesting so long as there's a good foil to dominate against. So let's hope for that, I guess.
That is true, man. And I think, looking forward as, of course, the Copa America, of course, like the logo just came out. They had a little unveiling or whatever for the logo for the tournament next year. That's going to be a good test as well for the U.S., Mexico, like those types of that types of tournament and all that is going to obviously Mexico and the U.S. going to have to elevate their game there. And I think it's going to be a big test for them, not only as a host nation there. Obviously, they hosted the tournament before, but just in general overall as organizations and federations and all that. So it's going to be interesting to watch that, and that'll be fun for sure. Moving on now to our main story today. Of course, we're going to talk about Lionel Messi. He finally arrived to Miami on Sunday. It was a little rainy, but they were able to make a party out of it. I mean, that was probably one of the biggest unveilings, if not the biggest unveiling I think I've ever seen in the U.S. for a player. I could be wrong there, but I feel like that was huge. What were your initial thoughts? I do want to get that out of the way. Jason, what did you think as soon as he came here? Is it because I know there's a lot of people thinking in a lot of ways. There's some people that are like, this is good for MLS. I'm glad he's here. There's another camp that's saying, well, he's older now. Doesn't matter. There's a Messi tax. There's this and that. He doesn't want to play an artificial turf. There's a lot of things, right? So what were your initial thoughts and how has it changed at all?
Well, have they changed? That's a good question. I say not yet, but that may still come because there's, still a lot of football to be played. But my initial thoughts were one of surprise, largely because of the fact this goes back to when we had the World Cup. There's a contract for Saudi. And if there was any player that was going to go for big bucks to the Saudi league, you would have thought it was the guy who was doing like Saudi tourism videos.
Yeah.
But, for whatever reason, maybe just optics, he chose to go to Miami. He chose to, do a different thing. I do know, like, if Barca had their, economic house in order, he wanted to go back there. It just wasn't possible. So that's one of those things. Hate to rain on anybody's parade, but you were still kind of second choice, even if you got the GOAT. Then at the same time, it still does largely, even though it seems to be more increasingly relevant, and Messi has seemed to have more in the tank than a lot of winners in Europe that have come here. But it is still kind of a retirement tour kind of thing. So it remains to be seen. I didn't watch his first match. I have to admit, there's still not a lot that compels me to watch MLS. And, I guess what it would mainly have to come down to is can he make them a winner? And can he again, create the kind of narrative that he created, at the nations level and then at the club level, and, in two different places before this. So again, pessimistic largely, but also open-minded to where the journey goes. But just in terms of the whole, what's this mean? Kind of business as usual in my mind.
Yeah, and you mentioned it too. Is he going to make the one? I think that's the biggest question I've thought about that people aren't really talking about enough. Like, obviously, financially, it's amazing, right? Like, it's so many positives, but when you get down to brass tacks, nobody's really talking about whether they're gonna it's gonna make a team that's in last place in the Eastern Conference. Yeah, at 5-3-14. is he, how better is he gonna make them? And obviously, we'll get to talking about the additions of Sergio Busquets and Jordi Alba, who had become official in the last week. But yeah, Muzz, what were your initial thoughts on Messi joining Miami?
I personally thought it was crazy. Like
Mm-hmm.
people like you mentioned, Jason. It was that you would think the person who had a contract and tourism ambassador for Saudi Arabia was going to go to the Saudi League and join his ever compared other GOAT, Cristiano Ronaldo, right? Who massive fee and a massive amount of money and the largest contract, blah blah blah. But when I heard and I saw tweets that Messi was coming to Miami to MLS, I was honestly stunned. Like, I thought it was insane. Like, it's a huge, it's a huge coup. Like, it's insane. Like, MLS, right? It's on the lowest rung of American sports, like behind MLB, NBA, NFL, blah blah blah, NHL. In like terms of soccer, right? It's not a worldwide. It's not a top 10 league, right? It's behind a bunch of European leagues. It's behind the Liga MX. It's behind the Brazilian league and all that. So, but the aspect of Messi coming to Miami, I thought it was like it's going to change everything. Like I've been going to the games a lot. The Chicago Fire, they've been okay. They've been a lot better this season than last season. But the general aspect of like Messi, right, one of the world's best players, even though he's at his tail end of his career, but just coming off like the World Cup, right? He won the World Cup. He won the world's biggest achievement, career achievement that many can't say they ever done. And then he's coming to MLS, which is like, at its right now, it's okay. And like, there's a lot of teams, there's a lot of young talent. I watched a good chunk of it. There is so much I think that can be done. And that's where they have a vision now that Messi's here, right? Like, so Messi was in Liga 1, right? Which was the French league, and he played on PSG. They marketed that, I think, well, but right, how many people were really going out of their way watching PSG, like world? So I think that whole tie-in with the Apple TV and Messi coming here, just like the U.S. money / marketing machine, plus being the language of English, seriously, I think it's going to help go crazy with it. You know how I think they're going to follow like that EPL model that EPL has done in the U.S. To really gain fans and push it hard and become not just what they claim is like the number one league, it's just like the most marketable league as well, right? So I think they're really pushing for that, and then Messi helps with that insanely. And the fact that he's on Inter Miami is crazy. Like I said, I didn't think it would happen. It's different to say the least.
Piggyback off of that last bit, like it is financially, that is the main thing, both financially for him and financially for the club. And I know you alluded to the fact that Alba and Busquets are next up, and the things that were coming to mind with that was, again, it's dating myself because like any young listeners will be like, what? I forgot. I wasn't even born yet. But like LeBron's announcement kind of thing. Like, Miami's a destination, even in a league that is below other leagues, that is at the bottom of the league that it's in. But then at the same time, in terms of like being a draw, the thing I was thinking about that was interesting, he was on PSG. And yes, you could watch him during in the United States at all of the Champions League stuff. But with the last contract, Ligue 1 screwed up and was the hardest of all the major leagues to watch in the United States on a streaming platform. It was easier to watch La Liga, Serie A, and the Bundesliga, and of course the Premier League. So you had, this triumvirate of great players of greatness that on a Saturday was really hard to watch. Like you had to specifically want to watch PSG to watch it in the United States. And everything else has just become this trickle down of like, oh, well, I have that platform, so I will watch it. Like Apple Plus, like that's exactly how Apple Plus with MLS is going to be. Like, oh, I've got that. Let me turn that on. And so from that standpoint, it's definitely. And again, it's weird because the people that run PSG, you would think, would have that mindset that put A to B to C together. That really fell apart in just seeking the biggest contract, but not having that like modality and that linking things together. And that does seem to be a play. Like I mean, I know who's in charge of Miami, but I don't know if they're really in charge of Miami. So like, but at least whoever is the power behind the throne there knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I
The
agree. I
right
agree with
time
that.
and the right way.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and it's like you guys yeah put it perfectly when it comes to PSG. Like, I think like I mean, personally, my family has not had cable only the longest time, and I know, and like just flipping through the channels because we just do digital, the digital antenna, like just getting those channels, like it, like BN Sports is on, like it's like 25.7, and I'm not even making that up, like it's a literal channel, like, and that's they would give the games there, and occasionally I'd be watching like Messi on there, but it's like I don't think anybody knows that exists, right? It's like that to watch it that way. Like, so you're right, yeah, and I think it's a leg up. The America does have a leg up when it comes to the marketing and all that. I think also because I saw the comments that Ronaldo, but supposedly, who knows if they're how true? Because I know with soccer you can only trust so many quotes and so many
Right.
things that come out of Ronaldo's mouth. But supposedly, Ronaldo said that the Saudi league is better in quality than MLS. And what I was thinking is that even if that's true, at the end of the day, the marketing is one of the most important parts of it, and Saudi doesn't have that. Like as much as Ronaldo's there, I don't think anyone's going to go out of their way to watch one of his games, and even then, they're not going to be getting any more players anytime soon, of course, because they got like a ban or something, like a transfer ban or something. So, yeah, I don't know, but yeah, you guys were right about the whole like the way that the U.S. is doing it, and I think it's going to help. It's going to help more than it hurts, but I think also I think if it was just Messi, it would have been different. But I think having Alba, having Busquets does help Miami's situation, not only on the field, but I think overall people's attention there. And I think also I've always said this, and I don't know how much it really will do anything because I feel like it hasn't. But like I hope when these things happen, when teams get big players like this, that other teams will try to get them. I mean, look at the Fire with they've gotten Cuauhtemoc Blanco before, obviously, but having Shaqiri on there, that's pretty cool. But you always hope that it pushes other teams to do the same so that there's not just like one guy or a couple guys in the league. But obviously, there was also other comments that were made over the last week or so. Is Wayne Rooney talking about how he's not going to find the MLS easy? And I think any transition is not going to be easy. But for a guy like Wayne Rooney, who's been in the league before, of course, playing with DC United, like Jason, what do you think about his comments? And like, do you think it's more of the lack of quality of play in the U.S. that makes it harder, or is it more of just a different style of play?
I mean, I think it's more the latter
Yeah.
because again, you can take this and move it to another place. And I think the thing that's really key, like move any flash talent player to the Scottish Premiership, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a completely different animal because they just get big center backs, big forwards, and they just head the ball and rely on crosses and beat the hell out of each other in the midfield. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't resemble any of the big five leagues.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't describe MLS there, but there are stylistic differences and there are managing choices that make that different. Now I will say I don't mean to throw undue amount of shade at Wayne Rooney, but Wayne Rooney and his experiences at DC United, I don't think will be commensurate to Messi's in Miami, just because like they might have been close in age when they made this move, but in terms of the level at which they were playing at,
Yeah.
Messi's been way more like straight line or like more in the uptrend as a 30 something player. Like Wayne
Yeah.
had a pretty precipitous drop, as I recall. So like he was definitely losing fitness in a way that I don't think Messi ever would.
That is definitely a great point. Muzz, what's your take on it, the whole thing?
Yeah. I would have to agree, and also it's tough in the fact that I forget who mentioned it. I might have been uh an LA Galaxy player. Um, that the MLS is very right spread out, like the travel and the fact that they
Mm-hmm.
played through like summer. So right, the normal European leagues and the rest of the worldwide leagues are like August to May,
Mm-hmm.
um, tail end of summer through winter through beginning of spring, and this is like flat out from spring to fall, including the hot summer, no matter where you go in the U.S. And plus the travel distances, I think is also difficult. Like this, I don't know if this is the style of play. It could be. I think teams have stepped it up for sure, whether it's technical or physical, etc. Um, I don't think he'll find it easy, but I don't think he'll find it hard per se. He's, it's still Messi, right? It's some of these MLS teams, yeah, they're not very good. I mean, yeah, I know it's one player and it takes the whole team, but they brought the whole team, right? They're, like you said, Tata Martinez, the coach, Busquets, they're trying to bring on Luis Suarez. So there you have it.
I do think that's a really good point about like the logistical elements, because even we as US fans, I think it's just so much part of the course for like these travel things, but have to remember the distances. Like the shortest distance of a road trip in MLS is probably the longest in some of the European leagues, domestic leagues. And while that might seem like trivial, like there's so much with like sleep science and different optimization physically, somebody who's in their mid to late 30s and making this kind of shift for the first time, it's not going to have no impact. But also at the same time, physical specimen, again, I'll go back to it. He doesn't look like Wayne Rooney did when he's in United.
Yeah, you're right. That is true. That is true. And the thing is, like, yeah, even then, like all the science that they put into it now, especially, will help them and help especially Messi in that case. But yeah, I don't think he'll definitely lack anything. Yeah, and will not have an experience like Wayne Rooney's. And I think, in general, I think that having those guys too to kind of share the experience with them, like Busquets and Alba, will also help, as well as, Muz mentioned, I didn't mention, with Tata Martino being the coach there, I think also helps. And yeah, they're probably not done yet. It looks like they're going to get, looks like they could get maybe Luis Suarez, or I've heard many murmurs of other players, but we'll see in general. But anyways, I think that's a good place to wrap things up for this edition of WARR Media's Soccer Special. I want to thank my WARR colleagues for coming on, Jason Kessler and Muz Quadri. Of course, as always, check out all our other WARR content. And of course, follow us on social medias at WARR Media. We're on everywhere, from TikTok to Instagram and all that, as well as Threads. We're on there too. So check us out there. And of course, as I said at the beginning of the show, hopefully everything works out for the Women's World Cup and everything's able to unfold, though, as well. Hopefully everyone's okay. And we're thinking about them, all that happened in Auckland with the shooting. So for Saul Rodriguez, Jason Kessner, Muz Quadri, hopefully everyone has a great week and enjoys the Women's World Cup.